And welcome back to TL Talks podcast. I am TL. As usual, it's good to have you. Before we get started, a friendly reminder to like and subscribe. Let me tell you what I do when I like or subscribe, and maybe you can relate or not relate. When I like a video, it means that I like that video in particular. So whether it be about Jordan Peterson, who I adore, or something else, Browns, good interview, good content. If they make me laugh, that's usually enough. If they make me genuinely laugh while I'm watching it, it's usually enough for me to like it, because I feel like it's not easy to do that. You know, there's a lot of things that are funny, but to make somebody actually laugh in real life out loud is kind of an achievement. So that's when I like a video. When I subscribe, that's a little bit heavier. Subscribing is kind of saying, like, I vibe with this person in general. I enjoy their content. I agree with most of what they say. And I want to be notified when they put out new stuff. And so that's why I like and subscribe, or when I like and subscribe. As of right now, I'm okay with the likes. Likes are fine. As far as how many that I'm getting. Subscribes, I'm a little bit torn on that. I think we're in the 20s now. I feel like I get about 40-ish views, if not more, per video. And so I feel like if there's about 40 people watching them consistently, that should equal at least about 40 subscribers. Unless people are watching that don't like me, which, plot twist. So I feel like if we get in the 40s, I would be happier with that. We're in the 20s now, so I appreciate it in advance. Like and subscribe. Appreciate the love, and so we'll move on into the podcast. So we're going to start with the thought of the day. If you're familiar with my podcast, you know that I have a format that I follow pretty closely, and so every podcast I have a thought of the day. The thought of the day for this podcast has to do with ADHD in America. So what I've noticed is when I was younger, it seemed like it wasn't as hard to pay attention or focus on things as it is now. And so I've thought about this a lot because it seems like it's a pretty big issue in America. And maybe it's an issue in the whole world. I can only speak for where I live. But what I attribute that to is there's social media. There's so much information out there. Google, things you read on Facebook or other social media pages. So I think the oversaturation of information and all this information coming from us from different angles, contributes to our brains just can't handle it. I mean, no offense to anybody watching, but I mean, my brain isn't advanced. Maybe yours is, but I think that our brains just aren't really equipped to handle that much input of information coming in. And so what that does is it kind of overloads our system of processing things. And then with that, the end result of that is it's hard for us to focus on anything for very long in general. So I know for myself, I mean, I'm a big fan of YouTube, and I'm happy to be on YouTube with my podcast finally. But I know if I'm like browsing through stuff on YouTube and I see some, subject that interests me, I'll immediately look to how long it is. How long is the podcast? Is it, 2 minutes? Is it 7 minutes? Is it 14 minutes? And just based on that, if it's, 14, 15 minutes long, your boy's probably not going to watch it. Just because I know my attention span can't really be held that long. Like, unless it's a Joe Rogan podcast where he's talking in long form discussion like I do on mine, I'm just not going to be able to hang that long. And so I know that's how it is for me, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. But I just wanted to bring it up because I feel like it's a pretty big problem in our society. I'm not sure what the answer is because information is not slowing down. If anything, it's going faster. So I don't have an answer or a solution for that, but I know that it's a problem for me and it's a problem for a lot of other people. And so I would like to think that doesn't really diss my podcast. I like to think that I put out pretty good content, and I think my interviews are pretty good in general. You can agree or disagree. Let me know. Send me a DM if you like. But that's my thought of the day. Just ADHD. I feel like our whole country has ADHD. Not many of us are good at, you know, focusing for a long period of time. And I feel like that is a problem because if you can't focus for very long, how are you supposed to do well in school? You know, I feel like it's harder than it should be. And that's because my theory is we have an overload. And so that's my thought of the day. Moving on to my next segment, which is called If I Were President. This is a segment about if I were the President of the United States, what would I do differently? And hopefully you enjoy. So this month's segment for If I Were President involves recycling. So as we all know, recycling's an awesome thing to do. It's good for the earth. It's a responsible thing to do. I am a little bit of a hypocrite because I don't currently recycle, but I understand the value in recycling. So I think what I would do if I were the President of the United States is I was incentivized recycling. So how that would look, that could be, you know, people that recycle save money on what they pay for trash every month. I think the better idea is to make people pay more for not recycling, right? So the example there would be if you go to a grocery store and you want to get, you know, plastic bags or anything that's not recycling, you're going to have to pay for that. It's going to literally cost you more dollars to do it that way because it's not, you know, earth friendly. And so, and I'm like, you got to keep in mind, I don't recycle, so I would have to adhere to this, right? I would have to do the, you know, the checks and balances. Okay, I'm going to pay more money to be lazy and not recycle, and that's going to be less dollars in my pocket. So at what point does it make more sense just to do the right thing and recycle? So like I said, ideally I would not be a hypocrite and I would be already recycling, but I think that would do a lot of good for America and the world if that was incentivized. And so those are just some ideas about how you could do that to make it more common. Moving on to my third segment, which is called TLRantz. TLRantz is things that happen in my life that frustrate me. I like to share with you. My podcast is kind of a unique opportunity for me to vent or get things off my chest. And so thanks for listening. I guess you're kind of my therapist. So this month's TLRantz segment is about everybody asking for tips. Now you may or may not have noticed this, but pretty much almost everybody asks you for tips. I mean, it's ridiculous. When I go to a restaurant, I just went to an Italian restaurant tonight to eat dinner. I ordered at the counter. They bring it to your table. You know, you eat and you leave. There's a tip jar. When you sign the thing to pay, there's a tip line. Like, tips are everywhere. Everything you do, think about it. Like, some things have always been that way, right? Like, if you go to a restaurant, I was a server for a long time, that makes sense. If you're bringing somebody a service, like the food industry, where you are serving them, like you were literally waiting on them hand and feet, that makes sense to me to tip them. So, but tipping for other stuff, like, I mean, just tips are an option. Whenever you're ringing out somewhere, they're asking, like, would you like to add a tip? Like, just all these, like, it's everywhere. And so I don't know how it got that way. I don't know if, like, the whole world is poor now, or I don't know how that became socially acceptable. But the fact that you're being asked that makes me feel awkward. You know what I mean? Because, like, if it's in a scenario like at that restaurant, I'm not thinking about tipping anybody, right? Until you ask me, there's a tip jar in front of my face, then you're making me sign something that has a tip line, and now I'm feeling guilty about not tipping. When you didn't do it, what are you doing for me? At that restaurant, I'm ordering at the counter. They give me a little thingamajig to know where to bring the food. I fill up my own drink. I go sit down. They make the food, and they walk it 20 feet to my table, drop it off. The end. They bust my table when I leave. So that deserves a tip? I mean, listen, I'm not trying to be cheap, but it's just like, we don't need to tip the world, man. Like, there's certain things you should tip for, most things you shouldn't. It's just off the chain. And I don't know how we got here, but that's where we're at. And it drives me crazy. You understand? Okay, moving on. I want to talk briefly about football before we get into the interview. My interview is with none other than Brittany Bushman, who is definitely one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. She plays for the Texas Elite Spartans, and I've had the pleasure of seeing her a few times in person, and coaching her at the All-Pro game in Denver a couple years ago, and it was an awesome interview. I'll warn you ahead of time that in the interview there was a technical error, we'll call it. So this is what happened. This is embarrassing, actually. It's never happened to me before. So I was interviewing Brittany, and my interviews are about an hour long usually because we get into it. But I was about 20 minutes into the interview. And all of a sudden, I see on my screen, it says, you have 15 minutes remaining for this meeting. Click here to upgrade to Pro for more minutes. So imagine, this never happened to me before. I had no way of knowing this would happen. I'm interviewing Brittany Bushman. She's answering questions. Interview's going phenomenal. And because my interviews are usually about an hour. Now, I'm 20 minutes in, 25, and it says your meeting's over in 15 minutes. So now I'm trying to do the interview. I'm distracted by this thing in the corner saying it's a countdown of how many minutes you have left. So then I got put in a pickle, right? I'm like, okay, do I hurry up the interview and try to finish the questions quickly and skip some questions and then get it done in that time? So you'll see how it panned out. Basically, unfortunately, it cut her off when she was answering a question about USA football. She's a complete sweetheart, so I just sent her a message, said, hey, technical error, I'll be back in a few minutes. She stuck around for me. We were able to finish the interview afterwards. And so I apologize in advance. I have upgraded to Zoom Pro, so yay for that. So it should never happen again. But I do apologize. It looks poor, and I wish it didn't happen. But luckily, she was graceful in understanding the situation, and it was fine. We finished strong. So talking about the Browns and Bandits. The Browns, my favorite NFL team, and then the Denver Bandits, the team that I coach, or I am a coach of. So the Cleveland Browns, I'm excited. I feel like, of course, the only thing that's unknown is if Deshaun Watson is suspended and on how long. I feel like our roster's pretty damn good. I would love to get Clowney back. I feel like he's probably the biggest missing piece for the defense. We have some other options at DN, but not as established as Clowney. And so I feel like if we can re-sign him, we'll be in real good shape for opening day. And so, I mean, I'm excited. The AFC North is really tough. I think Joe Burrow and the Bengals are obviously very good. We've had their number, but they made it to the Super Bowl, so that has to be respected. The Ravens are always good. They have Lamar Jackson and company, and they probably won't have as many injuries as last year. And the Steelers are the team that doesn't have a very good established quarterback. They drafted Kenny Pickett. They have Mitch Trubisky. I actually like Mitch Trubisky, so it sucks that he's playing for the Steelers. But when you compare, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, they're kind of the fourth place as far as quarterbacks go, and we know how important the quarterback position is. So, with that being said, I'm anxious. I want to see, hopefully Deshaun Watson doesn't get suspended this year, so we have him for the whole year. I hope we wrap up the Baker Mayfield thing so he can find a new home and move on with his life. So hopefully that gets taken care of, but I know it's kind of a tricky situation. But yeah, I'm excited. The Browns didn't have a pick until the third round. We picked up several guys in the third and fourth round, and all those guys I've heard nothing but good things about. Perion Winfrey in the 4th round was crazy. He might be the steal of the draft. We got a lengthy cornerback in the 3rd round. We got a receiver from Purdue, I believe, David Bell. So all these guys, I mean, I'm hearing nothing but good things about them in camp. And so, once again, Andrew Berry to the rescue. I trust that guy a lot with his decision making. And so it's really awesome to have that, to have a really competent GM after so many dysfunctional years in Cleveland. So those are my thoughts on the Browns. Last but not least, the Denver Bandits. So my Denver Bandits have a record of 5-0 currently. There are 6 regular season games, so we have our last regular season game this Saturday. It's going to be our not only last regular season game, but last home game. So it's local, thank God. We've got all of our trips out of the way for regular season. So we're going to be playing Seattle, the Seattle Majestics, this Saturday in Westminster, Colorado. So looking forward to that. Seattle has had a rough season, but they're a well-coached team, and so hopefully we take care of business against them. I would love to finish the season undefeated and roll into the playoffs like that. But playoffs are going to be in San Diego, which is nice for San Diego, not nice for everybody else. And so right now we're just raising funds, trying to make that trip, trying to get our whole team there. Currently, we are missing, if you only count the players that started the season, that played in the first game against Utah Falcons, not the players that got hurt in the preseason and never got to play. If you count those players, unless I'm missing somebody, there's 4 players currently missing from that team that started. So I would say, Holly Custis made a good point in the group chat on the Gridiron Beauties that during this time of the year, that's pretty typical to be missing a few players. And so us missing 4, we have 3 of them on IR, probably won't return this season. And then 1 player has been dismissed from the team for reasons that I won't disclose. But I will say this publicly. I respect the leadership of the Denver Bandits for making that move. It would have been much easier to keep that player because she's good at football. And they did what's right for the culture by excusing her from the team. So big shout out to the Denver Bandits. 5-0, you can't do much better. We've been winning games in an ugly way, not scoring a lot of points. Our defense is playing really good, but the scores have been really close. I mean, really close, really stressful for coaches. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, the thing is everybody will criticize our offense and say they need to score more points. But our schedule this year has been brutal. We played our first game. First game was in Utah, who was a playoff team last year. Second game was Las Vegas, playoff team last year. We have a rematch. We just played Utah at home, playoff team, right? Phoenix, they're not very good, so we beat them 50-0. And then you have Seattle last. Oh, yeah, Oregon too. So Oregon played us tough. It was in Oregon, which is a hell of a trip. We ended up beating them 7-0. So if you go through the season, we played in Utah game 1, won 7-6. Crazy game. Then we play at home versus Las Vegas. We win 10-6. Then we played Oregon. We win 7-0. You see the common theme? Low scoring, us barely winning. Then we played Phoenix, won 50-0. It's the first time we scored, more than, 7 or 10 points. 50-0 in Phoenix. So that felt good. Then we come home and play Utah in the rematch. And Utah wanted revenge badly. We win that game 9-7. So once again, back to the same type of scores. So this last game against Seattle will be very interesting. Like I said, Seattle's well coached, and they have some good athletes. And so if we overlook them, they could beat us. They could mess up our undefeated streak. There's a lot on the line. I believe in momentum. I think it's a real thing. And so hopefully we take care of business and we can go into the playoffs and make some noise. So that's your update for the Denver Bandits. And without further ado, we're going to get into the interview. Like I mentioned earlier, my interview is with Mrs. Brittany Bushman, who is a star quarterback for the Texas Elite Spartans in the WNFC. She is amazing. I love her as a person and as a player, and it was an absolute honor to have her on the podcast. We were able to dive into a lot of stuff. We touched on her childhood, other sports that she's played, how she got into football, her similarities with Russell Wilson, that's enjoyable. Kind of the Texas way. So Texas is a top team in women's football and kind of how they operate. Her history with Boston. She recently was named as the starting quarterback for Team USA, which is phenomenal. Talked about that. They recently had a tough game against Alabama. We touched on that. WNFC playoffs, and she took 5 years off, so we talked about that too. So really cool. We covered a lot. Awesome interview. She said she enjoyed it, so that was mutual, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. So without further ado, here is my interview with Brittany Bushman. All right, so I'd like to welcome Brittany Bushman to the TLTALKZ podcast. Bush, it's an honor to have you. If there was a Mount Rushmore of women's quarterbacks, you might be on that sucker. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm excited.
All right, so like I said, we're going to go into mostly football talk, but a little bit about you. I don't know you that well. I was fortunate to meet you in Denver a couple years ago. When the WNFC, we had like that all-star game, and then there was like, obviously you guys were in the championship. I think it was against Utah that year. And I was a coach on one of the sides of the all-star game. And we had some kind of like fun challenge, or like you were throwing passes to people. I remember it was funny because like they were like, okay, Terry, you're in charge of that. So you coach that. And then I walked over to you and I was like, what? I don't need to coach you. Like you're already a top quarterback. Like I don't need to tell you what to do. So just have fun, you know what I'm saying? And so that's how we handled that. But I want to start, Brittany, with a little bit about you, since I don't know a lot about you. So if you don't mind, of course, whatever you're comfortable with, tell us about just you as a person, your childhood, where you grew up, your sports background, whatever you're willing to share.
All right, cool. Yeah. Let's see. So I grew up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a small New England town, born and raised. I went to college at Emmanuel College in Boston. So I'm originally from New England. Sports has just always been my outlet. It helped keep me on track, kept my grades, high. And yeah, just sports were my thing. But I always loved football. I was always playing like in the neighborhood with the boys. And, when it came to be like fourth grade, when Pop Warner started, I was like, oh, I want to play. Like, I want to play. Yeah. And my mom, my family, they always supported me. They thought I was crazy, but my mom was probably my biggest supporter, still is. And so I went through all through high school playing football. I was the first female to play at my high school. I lettered my junior and senior year. And I honestly was heartbroken my senior year because I never thought that I would put the pads on again. And that was tough, because football was my outlet. I loved contacts back then. And even my first few years of women's tackle, loved the contact. Yeah. But it was like 2005. My mom actually had moved to Texas. I went down there, was at one of my younger brother's Pop Warner games, just throwing the football at halftime. And a woman came up to me and was like, you got a great arm. You should come play for us. And I think at that time it was like the Dallas Rage or something like that. Yeah. And I found out about, let's see, what league was that? WPFL? I don't know which one it was. time, there's been several.
Yeah.
But, they played while I was still in college up in Boston. So I looked into it. I got hooked up with the Mass Mutiny, went to the tryout, and, kind of the rest is history. And I'm in women's football now.
So 2 clarifying questions. You said what year was it that you got involved with a Dallas team? Was it 2005 or 2015?
So 2005 is when I started with the Mass Mutiny.
Oh, wow. So it's been a while.
Yeah. Long time.
17 years. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like you're not even old enough to be playing that long, but
I think I was like 19, I think, when I first started with women's football. Yeah.
Okay.
I was a youngin', but the Mass Mutiny girls, or excuse me, women, they took me under their wing. They were helping me out. I was kind of in a weird place with my family, just moving down to Texas. So they were kind of like my emotional support. And obviously the game of football, just gives you so much in general. So they were really like my family up here, and I'm forever grateful for them. Like I got to play with Cahill and Brickhouse, Molly Goodwin. So like a lot of OGs, and some of them that, are still around. But yeah, that was my first football family.
Gotcha. Another question I had was, you said you played with the boys starting in 4th grade?
Yep.
And then all the way through high school?
All the way through high school. Yeah.
So when you say play, explain to me, are you saying like special teams player, backup quarterback, starting quarterback? Let's clarify.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see, freshman year, I was a captain. I was a backup quarterback, started at safety. And then like sophomore, junior year, starter on JV at safety, backup quarterback there. And then my senior year, they allowed me to play some varsity games, but I didn't get a ton of minutes. It was mostly all JV. But yeah, I competed. I was on the field. It was funny because like back then I had real long hair. I had a braid. I would put it in my shoulder pads. So you didn't see it during the game, but then afterwards, I'd take it off and the boys would see it and they're like, oh my God, did you see that girl? Like I hit her so hard and like she just popped right back up and she hit me, blah, 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 because I was playing mostly defense. So that's always a cool feeling, that I was able to compete at that level with them. I wish I would have had more opportunity to show what I could do at the quarterback position, but there's always those adversities, but that's fine.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Actually, I played quarterback and receiver my whole life. And not that it's about me, but I had a lot of potential, and then I made some decisions because when you're young, you think you know everything. And then those decisions ended up biting me. And it's like the butterfly effect. One decision can change everything.
Sure does, yeah.
So Brittany, I know that you're one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. I'm a huge fan of the sport. I've been involved in women's football for about 8 years. I'm a nerd at heart, so I engulf myself in the world of women's football, educated myself on the best teams, the best players. I wanted to be able to really immerse myself in the game so that I could have intelligent conversations about it. And now that I have a podcast, it's even more awesome because I'm able to interview people, pick brains of other coaches, how they do things, what I'm saying? Talk to players like you that are at the top of the sport. And so my nerd side is like just thrilled to be able to do that. And then of course, when other people watch it, they can also learn from that. So it's a win-win for everybody. But I guess my last question, like referring to your childhood and sports growing up, is you're obviously a top quarterback in the nation right now. And then when you went to Texas, somebody noticed your arm. When you're growing up, you played defense and backup quarterback. So I guess my question for you is, if there was a secondary position for Brittany Bushman, what would it be? You know what I'm saying? Because we know you're a hell of a quarterback, but what would you play if you could choose, if you were the coach and the player?
It's a good one. Well, my years in Boston, I played 4 seasons for them and I played running back.
Okay.
But, honestly, I'd love to play safety. I like to be able to read what's happening and I like to, run downhill and stick someone.
Yeah. Okay. Safety is the answer. Gotcha. All right. Fair enough. Okay. So you've been involved in football longer than I knew. So thank you for educating me. you were involved with some Boston teams. You originally are from the New England area, and we know you're with the Texas Elite Spartans now. So you may or may not be aware, I'm involved with the other podcast that Oscar runs, Gridiron Beauties, and I'm a co-host on there when I have time, when I'm not, coaching the Bandits. But in that little, private chat of people that are on that podcast, of course, you talk about, women's football in general, WFA, top teams, Boston, Texas, playoff landscape, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in those private conversations, they've talked about stuff like Bushman lives in Boston, but she plays for Texas, so she has to commute. And I didn't know that. So if that, you can confirm or deny that. But then that's also interesting because my team, the Denver Bandits, for the first time in our history, not only do we have crazy good numbers, but we have this mixture of like an out-of-state contingent of players that travel back and forth, and then also international players, which I've never had the privilege of having fancy stuff like that before. And so it's good. It's good that we're taking a step in that Texas direction. But it's been interesting because it's all new for us. And so there's going to be learning curves. So I just wanted you to talk about kind of it's a two-part question. Your playing experience, your playing experience in Boston versus Texas, then also the dynamic of having out-of-state players or international players and how that looks on Texas's team.
Yeah, for sure. So, my time in Boston was really great. Mind you, this was, way back in 2005. So
back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. So, women's football, still in a huge growing stage. We didn't have practice uniforms. You were just kind of throwing on whatever we could find. People are helping and sharing, finding equipment. We're having to drive ourselves down to games. There are times where we're having practice and we have to turn on people's headlights, as the sun's going down to finish practice, because we just didn't have the funds to be able to have lights and stuff like that. And I think that's true. And that's the experience that a lot of teams have had. Even when I moved to Dallas, that was, my first season in Dallas was 2009. My first championship was in 2010 with the Lone Star Mustangs. And, we had a person who pulled a trailer with a spotlight up there. And that's what we used for practice because we just didn't have enough money to pay for lights, but we know that we had to get our practice in and stuff like that. So obviously the funding and things like money is huge. Football, this is an expensive sport. No doubt. That's why I love being a part of the WNFC because they are investing in all of their teams. They're investing in the women. They are providing a professional experience. And it's the highest level of tackle football that I've been able to play in all of my years. I tell Odessa frequently that if WNFC never came about, I probably would not be playing football anymore. Simply because it is a lot. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. And to make those sacrifices every single year, and really having lots of hurdles to be able to play the game that you love, it just becomes a lot, and it consumes your life. And it was tough back in the day. And so I'm just really thankful to see the growth of the sport, to see where we're at when it comes to the professionalism of the WNFC. The level of competition has increased substantially. You look at the scores across the WNFC and, it's coming down to the last possession in a lot of these games. People want to see that, they don't want to see the blowouts anymore. That's not fun. So things have definitely changed a lot. But as far as, playing for Boston versus Texas, I would say my my experience at the beginning of being in Texas was very similar, just with a lot of the hurdles and barriers that we had to face when it came to practice fields, transportation, all this stuff, you know. But
So
both
that was
teams,
similar.
yeah. You know, but Boston has always had a core of women who have been dedicated to the game. You know, they have a really well-run organization, and that's where I really learned that this is a complete team sport. You know, I played basketball in college. You know, and in basketball, you can have one player that's able to take over a game. In football, you can have the best player in the country on your team and still lose by 50.
Yeah.
You know, it really is the ultimate team sport. And that's, you know, Boston is where I learned that. And I've been able to, you know, kind of take those lessons into Dallas. And when I came to the Dallas Diamonds, they already had a huge core of women too that were highly successful. You know, they had already won a couple of their championships. You know, so they understood family, they understood what winning was about. And it was nice just to be able to kind of slide in and find my place within that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is before my time, which I feel like I'm pretty educated about women's football since I joined. But since you started in 2005, you know, I got involved in like 2014. So that's like a full decade before. So some of these team names I've never heard of, which is kind of embarrassing for me, but also cool to learn.
That's all right. They change, you know, all the time anyway. So
yeah, like there was the Boston Militia, which was a very good team. Then they folded. They had like some rich owner that stepped away. Then they rebranded, thank God, to the Boston Renegades, who are also a powerhouse. So I guess my last question before we move on to a different topic would be, and this is kind of the elephant in the room. So Boston is by far, you know where I'm going with this, by far the best team in the WFA. It's not debatable. You see them play DC, you see the results, like it is what it is.
Yep.
Texas has never lost in WNFC. So they're the best team in the WNFC until they're knocked off, basically. So since you have Texas that's that good and Boston that's that good, me as a fan of football and as a fan of women's football, I think it's kind of a shame that it's not a priority to anybody, or it's not a priority to enough people for there to be a national championship where, you know, a team from the WNFC wins their championship, a team from the WFA wins their championship, they meet halfway, they get it on, and now there's a winner of everything. It's undisputed. You know, let's dance. So I've been saying that for years. I know other people have said it too. But what is your take? You're a player. You're competitive, and I know you have the utmost confidence in your team. But Boston's a different beast. They're very well coached. They got your girl Cahill over there. She's a legend as well. Now they have two international running backs. They're both a problem. So it's a very intriguing matchup. But I usually when I'm talking to media people about it, or I'm talking to other coaches. I don't usually talk to players about it. So I'm curious, from a player perspective, do you agree with me? Would you like to see that happen, or is it kind of whatever? I'll just play the games that are scheduled.
No, let's go. Let's compete.
Yeah,
I want to see it happen too. You know, I think as a competitor, you want to play against the best. And Boston, like you said, is clearly the best team in the WFA. You know, we're the best in the WNFC right now. And yeah, I mean, let's go head to head. Let's settle the debate. I think it would be, you know, the game of the decade for women's football right now. It would be really awesome if we could get that set up. I think a lot of players on both teams would love to see that happen. I think it would be a really great game because, like you said, Boston is very well coached, and so are we. So it'd be a good one to see.
So what do you think are the obstacles that prevent that from happening? Because it hasn't happened yet.
Well, I know that the idea has been thrown out, and I don't think that it has been accepted by the other side. So I don't know what barriers are there for them, but I know that Texas Elite is ready to go.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So it's good to know from our, I mean, I call it our side because I only care. I mean, I love women's football, so I talk about WNFC, WFA, but I'm invested in the WNFC, right? Like I was in the first meeting in Plano, Texas, when they talked about, the grassroots of the WNFC. So I've been there since day one, and my team is in WNFC. I believe in WNFC's vision, and so like it's not a perfect league. Of course, there's always things that can be better, but like as far as building a professional brand like you talked about, I mean, they're just killing it. They're killing it on so many different levels. So I'm with that. I'm with whatever can get the players played, whatever can get us more exposure. The fact that all of our games are streamed is off the chain. Like it's never been done before. So I'm a huge advocate of our league for obvious reasons, but I try to be fair about talking about all of women's football, but it's good to know that from your side, from WNFC and Texas Elite Spartans, you guys are with the smoke, line it up. You know what I'm saying? So me, like I'm an analytical person. So I'm thinking, okay, they're in Boston, you're in Dallas, whatever's halfway, right? Figure out what's halfway, find a host stadium, might be Nashville, who knows? But find that stadium, have somebody host it. The teams split the cost 50-50. So nobody's paying more, you know what I mean? You have refs that are obviously not biased, and then you just dance and make sure it's streamed. Obviously WNFC can cover that. And then, I mean, I would fly my Italian ass to wherever it is to watch it in person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if you know me, Brittany, like I literally go out of my way to watch the highest level of football. Like if you look at like back to when I got started in women's football, I remember flying on a bye week to go watch the San Diego Surge play the Cali team, right? Two top 10 teams. I flew to Chicago to watch Chicago Force play Boston in person.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I flew to Vegas to watch the best of the West in person. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a common theme. Your boy's been at all of it. So
yeah,
like,
you love it. Let's go.
yeah. So like I'm a true fan of the sport. So that game, like I would probably travel to Texas just to see the WNFC championship, just because I'm invested in the league. But Texas versus Boston, it's a rare opportunity that needs to happen. It's overdue. And so since I'm friends with Molly, I'll probably call her just because I'm curious now. Like, okay, what's stopping you? Like, you guys are all about the smoke. So are they. You probably can afford it. I'm not going to assume you can't. They just had a $10,000 grant from Bill Belichick. So like, I don't see what obstacles there could be unless it's something personal, which hopefully is not the case. When there's stuff, it's
definitely reach out to Boston for sure. Because Texas is ready. It would be a great game. Honestly, it would be a great game.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So a good segue is Alabama. We just talked about, before we started the podcast, we talked about, my team has been winning ugly, but winning, thank God. And you said, yeah, we just had a tough game against Alabama. And so we can relate, but a win is a win. And so Brittany, was perplexed because this season, there's been a theme or a common like pattern in Texas games. That if it's a good team, that's a relative term, but if it's a good team, they play you guys competitive in the first half. And then in the second half, you guys pull away, right?
Yeah.
So think about Mississippi, think about Washington, right? All these games were close to halftime. Then I don't know if you guys like, drink some kind of power drinks at halftime or like, Incredible Hulk stuff. But whatever happens at halftime, in the third quarter, you're a different team. And it's lights out. You guys pull away. I'm not sure if it's an attrition thing or a coaching thing or all the above, but that's been what's happened. So we saw it happen against Mississippi. We saw it happen against Washington. Then Alabama's kind of on the same level. They're a good team, not at Texas's level. So I figured the same thing would happen. So I told you there's that chat with Gridiron Beauties. I'm at my game, so I'm locked into the Denver game. But I'll check the chat, and I'll see like Oscar talking about the scores because I can't watch the games. I'm obviously coaching my team.
Right.
and they say, okay, whatever, Alabama is down by 7 to Texas, close game so far. And then he asks the question, can Alabama keep it up? Can Alabama keep this game as close as it is? And I literally put in the chat, no. Like, we've already seen this before. Like, we know how the story ends. Like, Texas is going to blow them out in the second half. It is what it is. Keep moving. Well, as you know, the game ended up being a straight up battle. You guys won 21-20. And I actually watched the whole game because I told you I'm a nerd. Watched the whole game in its entirety to see how the hell they were able to pull that off. Yeah. So my only nosy question for you in this interview, Brittany, is the only player that I saw that I noticed was missing in that game is Destiny Yarborough. You had Rashawn Gore, you had all your receivers. I don't know your line that well, but I know a few of them. It looked like they were there. You were obviously playing on defense. I saw 33 at safety. OG was playing. The fullback that plays linebacker now is playing. Like, Guidry was playing. So a lot of the faces that I'm familiar with were out there, but the game was close. So it's funny because when I coached the WFA All-Star or All-American game in Pittsburgh, I was the coach of the West Side. And we're coaching against the East Side. At the time, the East Side had Kelly Smith and Rashawn Gore on that side, right? Yep. So when I was trying to coach, and you know how it is with All-American games, it's like herding cats. Well, I was trying to coach that team and prepare us. And when I was giving them notes, I'm like, okay, we need to stop Rashawn Gore. We need to stop Kelly Smith. Those women are phenomenal. Yeah. I remember a Cali War player responding to me and being like, no, F that. Like, we're awesome. Like, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess you're not getting what I'm saying. Like, you need to respect how much talent they have. Well, in that game, the East won like they usually do. And, Kelly Smith and Rashawn Gore ran all over the place like I thought they would. And that's the way that went. Well, now you fast forward to right now, Rashawn Gore is one of the key players on the Texas team on offense, and Kelly Smith is on the other side, right? Mm-hmm. We know she's a game breaker. So I watched the game and it was very interesting. I felt like you had a good game, but you were kind of like half and half, right? Like, some of your throws were on point and then other ones weren't, which could be pressure or could be just, you're not perfect. You're going to have games that are a little bit off. So that's how you played as a quarterback. And then Kelly Smith's going to do what she does. But it was just very interesting how it all played out, right? Like, we've seen games be close at halftime, but then you guys always pull away. So the fact you didn't pull away, and I counted their sideline, and what stood out to me was, unless my eyes aren't good, they had about 30 players. Mm-hmm. So they didn't come with a big, like, they were at home. It was in Birmingham at a home game with about 30 players playing against the Texas Elite Spartans. Like, that's kind of David and Goliath, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing all these different factors, right? I'm seeing how the game's going, how many players they have. Some players are playing both ways, and they just balled out. And so I think, and you can confirm or deny, I think that Alabama was decently coached in that game, but one of the biggest things was Alabama didn't really play afraid. Like, they like showed up like, let's go. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't care if you're Texas, like, let's play. So I think mentality plays a big role in that, right? I've heard San Diego players say that when they played you guys in the championship last year, they weren't ready, and they mentally were intimidated, and then we saw how the game went. It wasn't competitive. So would you say that was a big part of why the game was so close, or how would you, from your perspective, how would you give a synopsis to the Alabama game?
Yeah. Alabama, they have a lot of great athletes. They're really fast. They play physical. When we played them in the conference championship last year, they were hitting. They have veteran players, so they know the game. They know what it takes to play 4 quarters. And so, hats off to Alabama for playing all 4 quarters, and battling with us for sure. But honestly, we shot ourselves in the foot so many times. We probably had over 200 yards in penalties. typically, we typically hit on all cylinders coming out in the second half, and it wasn't. And sometimes, you have games like that where we're not all on the same page, or one person or a couple of people are making a mistake during this play here and there, and we just had too many of those. And that happens. When that happens throughout the entire game, of course, that's going to give people who want to compete for 4 quarters some hope, which obviously is going to drive them to, pick it up a little bit more. And yeah, they competed for 4 quarters, I'd like to say if we see them again, or if we saw them again, because I don't think they're making playoffs this year, I think it's a different game. I know that we all as a team are very upset about our performance and what we put on film. We have had multiple sessions already. We will have one later tonight. And that wasn't elite football. So kind of chalk it up to that. Like you said, there were some really great plays or throws that I did make, but there were too many missed really easy opportunities and throws that I didn't make. And I put that on my back. I'm better. I know that I'm better than that. I have to be better than that for my team. And so I think that you'll see a different team come out against Kansas City this weekend. But yeah, it was a competitive game, and thankfully we were able to make that stop there at the end when they tried to go for the 2-point conversion. I don't know if I were a coach if I would have done that, but I mean, it is what it is. And, we came out with the W. So, but again, I think too many mistakes. We weren't all together, all on the same page. I don't know if we can chalk that up to our bye week, but there's no excuses. We did not play our best football, and we'll come out and we'll be better this weekend.
Gotcha. So that brings up another point, the out-of-state player dynamic. What can you say to that? What can you speak to that? Like, you do live you East Coast, obviously. So you live in Boston?
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
So how does that work as far as traveling and practice and all that stuff?
So so it's something brand new. Like I said, I lived in Texas for 12 years. This was something, family stuff popped up. My grandfather passed away a few years ago. I'm very close to my grandmother, and I just felt like I needed to be closer. So that's kind of what brought me back home up here. I knew that leaving football, I didn't honestly know if I would even be able to play football, because, obviously being the quarterback like that, you need to be like at as many things as you can.
Yeah.
You're the quarterback. So I really didn't even know what football would even look like for me. But thankfully, speaking with, talking details out with Odessa and Dillo, we were able to make it happen. So we practice on the weekends, and I fly in. We have film sessions, during the week. We connect through Zoom. I guess I can thank the pandemic for that, to be able to, have that as a resource. But it's been working out quite fine. I stay in contact with the offense as much as I can. Like I said, Zoom is my best friend. I'm constantly texting and stuff like that. Coach gets the game plan out really early, and weekend practices, we get in what we can get in. But during preseason, I'm there every weekend. And, we just get ourselves together. And thankfully, we got a core of veteran players. We're able to make it happen.
Gotcha.
And there are a few, there are a couple others that kind of do the same thing. And, you guys are in the same boat. It obviously presents some challenges. You don't get all the reps that you'd like. But that, for me, it's been able to get me into my playbook a lot more, because I'm not getting the physical reps. So I got to stay involved in the game in other ways. And I honestly think that it's actually elevated my game, because I'm analyzing things from a different perspective. So you do what you got to do to compete. And I'm really thankful that we've been able to work it out and make it happen, because football is my joy. So I feel blessed to be able to have the opportunity to be on Texas Elite.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note, let's talk about the Texas way. So I feel like Texas is obviously a top team in the sport, best team in the WNFC until they're knocked off. I've heard through the grapevine that there's certain things you guys do that most teams don't do. teach your team offensive schemes or the offensive playbook, and then have test them on those things to make sure that they have absorbed it. So you can confirm or deny stuff like that. But I'm just curious about what Texas does. I know they probably have a little bit more money than most teams, which is kudos to them. I mean, they have more connections. OJ could sell a ice cream cone to a Eskimo. So that's awesome for you guys. But I'm curious, what things do you think Texas does that sets them apart from most women's teams?
I mean, the first thing that always comes to my mind is that we're just always on the same page. We know what our goal is at the beginning of the year. And, we put all personal things aside. And whatever coach needs us to do, what she feels like, is going to get us to the 9 Cup and to win the 9 Cup again. We trust her, and we are completely bought into what she is expecting us to do. I mean, we dress alike. We're all showing up to practice on time. We're all in our practice gear. We have really high expectations, and if you don't meet them, then you will not be a part of the team. And I think everybody recognizes that, and they know that what we have is really special, and they're bought in. And so, we're able to kind of cultivate the younger players, pass on our knowledge, because we won't always, we're not going to be here forever. But elite comes with a lot of responsibility. It's performing at the highest level, on the field, but more importantly, it's off the field. So we have a contract. If you fall outside of those lines, Odessa has no problem letting you go. And so people just know their expectations. We have clear objectives, and if you don't fall in line, then, you're just
see you later. Yeah.
See you later. Bye.
Everybody's expendable.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right, fair enough.
I know that kind of sounds terrible to say, but
no,
it
a higher standard.
Yeah, Odessa has multiple championships. She's been on national teams, so has Dillo. And like the core, like a lot of our veterans, we've also won championships before, outside of Texas Elite. So we know the amount of commitment, the level that we have to perform at, the things that we need in order to win. And so again, if you aren't able to do that, then you won't be a part of what we're doing.
Gotcha. So I'm curious, are you guys familiar, do Texas players, are they familiar with the whole WNFC landscape? Do they know the top teams in the West, top teams in the East? Do they know Atlanta's undefeated? They don't give it many points. Do they know all that stuff, or are they just kind of locked into their this week's opponent?
I think it's both. I think we're very aware of what's happening in the WNFC. I know a lot of players, after our game, when we're traveling back on the bus, or even Sunday morning, we're putting on Vire. We're looking at some of those games. So we're definitely well aware, but we're absolutely locked into what we have to do, because we got to take care of our business first, to then be able to handle it game by game. So for sure, what's happening.
All right. Last question. Team USA. So you were selected as a Team USA quarterback, the starting quarterback. Real quick before I let you go, how was that tryout process? And I know you're excited, but just how was that experience? Because I mean, there's not much of a higher, honor.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel honored, extremely humbled. I've worked hard to get here, so it's really nice to be recognized, for sure. I'm excited to lead, these top athletes in our sport, in Finland this summer. Tryout, I mean, it was competitive. There were 12 quarterbacks, they took us through some skills and drills to see how we work. We kind of progressed and picked up the pace, got to some 7-on-7, eventually to the 11-on-11 portion. But I mean, it was highly competitive. It was tough because there were so many quarterbacks to, you really had to be locked in and on point every single opportunity that you got to play. And so I think it was tough all around, because it's like, if you messed up that 1 or 2 times that you're getting your reps, obviously I don't know how the checks and balances went.
All right. And we are back. So I'm an idiot. Luckily, Brittany Bushman is very kind. But I was telling her that during the interview, it showed me a thing that said upgrade to pro to continue your meeting, which had never done that before. So I did upgrade to pro. Yay. And so we shouldn't have that ever happen again. So I apologize, Brittany. But so I had other questions for you. Now we don't have to rush. We have about 10 minutes left. I want you to start from the beginning, if you don't mind, about the USA process. The reason I'm asking you about it is because I had people in the podcast chat that were at that tryout, so they have their own opinions. Heard a whole bunch of juicy gossip about the quarterback group. You can assume, and so I'm curious from your perspective. I know that there's a lot of people there, so reps are like at a premium. But I just want you to tell me as much as you can about that whole experience.
Yeah, for sure. No, what I was saying, like, I think you had to be ready to perform every rep because you weren't getting a lot of them. And I think that put a lot of people in high pressure situations. Right. And so, that aspect of it was tough, but everyone got the same amount of reps. We went through the same drills. I mean, they made it as fair as they possibly could. I've heard of things like, oh, it's really political. The coach knew these players and this and that. And I mean, I think you run into that anywhere at any level. I mean, life is built off of relationships. So I mean, it happens, but you got to be ready to show out, and you have to do it every single play, especially in a situation like that when there are so many players. You got to do things to make yourself stand out. And like I said, I think a lot of quarterbacks started to really separate themselves when it came to the 7-on-7 portion. I mean, Torrey did really well. So did Kelly. You had Cahill and Horton who were there. Obviously, Horton was on the team in 2017, so she already kind of knew what to expect. I had been to the 2017 and 13 tryouts, so I kind of had an idea of how it was going to run and just what you really needed to do to kind of get seen. Like you got to bring it every single play. But everyone, like I said, everyone got the same reps. We were on the same field. We all had to contend with the crappy wind that was relentless most of the weekend.
I heard about that.
Yeah, that wind was crazy. So I mean, they did the best that they could, I think, to get a fair look at everyone. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. There was a lot of women. I think maybe if they were going to change anything about it, it would be some way to figure out smaller groups, I guess, so that people could get more reps. But I mean, USA football did the best that they can. They found great fields. I was upset that it was grass at first. I'm just typically used to turf, especially being in Texas. They're all turf fields. But it was beautiful. I had never seen, honestly, grass like that nice. So I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll make it work. But yeah, no, thankful for USA football for providing the opportunity and the space. And I think they have a really great coaching staff. I was really excited, obviously, to see a bunch of my Texas Elite teammates make it. That was super cool. And a lot of the WNFC players. I was really curious to see kind of what that looked like, WFA versus WNFC.
Me too.
Yeah. So I think it's cool. I think we actually have a really good mix on the team of both sides. But there were a lot of WNFC players there, and it was really cool just to see the level of play of all of those players versus everybody else. It was pretty cool.
So I mean, I don't know how many players you know. I mean, you've been around for a while. It's not an old joke, but you have been around for a while. So, I mean, I don't know how many players you know. So, like, when you're at the tryout, could you literally see, like, could you notice, okay, that's a WFA player, that's a WNFC player, like, because you're noticing who's balling out, right? You're not noticing who stands out, who's like killing it, who's not. So, did you know the players well enough to be able to differentiate the different leagues, or is there so many?
No, there were a lot. Honestly, no. With the quarterbacks, yes, just because obviously I'm in the group. Been a quarterback for a while, so like, of course, like I'm gonna know. But
that part's easy.
I honestly, there were at least half of the quarterbacks that I did not know. I did
Oh,
not know
wow.
what league they even played in. So there was that. And like I knew like some of the top WNFC players, of course, just because you
Yeah.
know they're on our feeds all the time, and you know we're seeing them in our articles. But to be honest with you, you know, I took 5 years off.
You did?
I did. I tore my ACL in my 2013 season. So
Oh,
I made Team USA in 2013. But first game of that season, it kind of went downhill. And I didn't really get to compete over in Finland in 2013 because ACL was gone. After that, I honestly, I took 5 years off, not because it took 5 years for my knee to heal, but like we
of course
mentioned
not.
earlier in the podcast, football is a lot. And you know, women's football wasn't to the point where we were still having these blowout games and we were still having to pay a crap ton of money to play, you know, lots of hurdles and things like that to even get on the field. And I wasn't ready to make that commitment after taking a year off with the injury itself. So I didn't come back to women's football until 2018. So a lot of those players who were on the 2017, I didn't know. You know, there were a ton of new players who had come into the league. And so there are a ton of new faces for me, to be honest.
Gotcha. So that makes a lot of sense to me, because guess when I entered women's football? 2014. So when I entered, you were on your 5-year hiatus.
I was,
And then I didn't see you until around 18, right? So
Yep.
I didn't know if you started playing football in 18. You know, I had no perspective of, you know, when you started or what happened before my time. So that helps me connect the dots. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
My next question for you is about, and now we have more time. So I wanted to ask you about other sports. You said you played basketball, right?
Yep. I played in basketball in
College?
college. Yep.
Were you a point guard or shooting or?
Mainly shooting guard, but I would also play point if I needed
Gotcha.
to. Yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool. Did you play any other sports? You play any other sports besides football and basketball?
Like in high school, I did softball for a year and then I ran track, actually threw the javelin. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then once I got to college, like I said, played basketball those 4 years, and then did softball and track a few of those years as well.
Gotcha. Cool. Very cool. So I think you've heard this before, but you always remind me of Russell Wilson. I feel like you
Boy.
are, yeah, you may have heard it before, but I feel like in the women's game, it's kind of cool actually. There's certain women's players that either look like or play like or both certain NFL players. And so the Russell Wilson, I feel like it's a pretty good comparison because he's one of the top quarterbacks. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like you're being compared to, you know, Brock Osweiler. But what do you think of that comparison? Like as far as?
Yeah, man, I love it. You know, like my younger days of quarterback, I was running a lot more. I kind of honed in my reads, and so I focus a lot more on that, and I could stay in the pocket, but I could still get around, you know. But I love Russell. I love watching him work. You know, he's a magician. He has great leadership. So I follow him on all of his socials. I think he's a great guy. He's got a great outlook on life. So that I feel like I can emulate too. I feel like I'm a very positive person like him. I want to be a great leader for my team. And so, yeah, I'm completely okay when people compare me to.
That's an understatement. I gotcha. And then one thing that I wanted to, is a curious question. When I first met you or knew about you, it was when you were playing for Texas, but they had another quarterback. So Jessica Gearhart was playing for them. And I knew that she was really good, but then I heard that you were really good too. And so I'm like, well, that's so Texas to have two really good quarterbacks, right? But you kind of had to like wait your turn while she played for a while. So how was that for you? Because, you know, like you're a really good quarterback now. I'm assuming you've been a very good quarterback for a long time. But on certain scenarios, whether you ever had to sit behind Cahill or Gearhart or whoever it was, right? You look at that like a positive that you're able to have a teammate that's good to learn from, or kind of a frustrating thing because you're a competitor and it's hard to watch?
Yeah. The Cahill thing was frustrating just because I never really got an opportunity to compete for the position.
Okay.
But I was just happy to play. So, I settled into running back. That was fine. So in Texas, Gerhard actually got hurt at the beginning of the 2018 season, and Odessa called me, and that's actually how I got back into women's football.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I helped. I was just kind of there to help out until she got better. So I wasn't completely, I'd say, committed, like this is my thing, I'm back in it.
Right.
But that year I got a little taste, and everything, came right back. And going into, I remember it. I was on Christmas break in 2018, and I was like, you know what? I had a really great time. I missed my sisters. I love this game, and I'm coming back, and I'm going to earn the starting quarterback position. And so I made that up in my mind. I did the work for it. Odessa at the beginning of every season, nobody has a spot. You have to compete and you have to earn yours. So I knew that I'd have an opportunity to compete. And that's what I did. So came into training camp, and that whole preseason, every single practice, no matter what it was, Gerhard and I were competing. And I earned the starting spot, and, kind of rest is history with Texas Elite. So I think it was good. It helped me lock in. It
Challenged you.
Yeah, it definitely challenged me for sure. And it's real. I'm really happy the way that it worked out. I'm super thankful, actually grateful, really grateful for Odessa for calling me in to just come help out for that practice, which now led to kind of where we're at now. So.
Yeah. So last two questions. The 5-year hiatus. So you had an ACL injury, which obviously takes a while to recover from. That turned into a long break from football. 5 years is a long time. Because father time's undefeated. So what would you attribute that to? Besides the obvious that it's a big time commitment and a big, it's like a life-consuming endeavor. Besides that obvious answer, what else would you contribute? An ACL injury turning into 5 years off.
Yeah. It was really tough having the game taken away from me, because that's all I ever wanted to do. I was a substitute teacher, and I was coaching select basketball. I was able to pay my bills and stuff like that, but it wasn't anything serious. I didn't really have a career. I was just worried about playing football. When that was taken away, it honestly forced me to figure out who Brittany Bushman was outside of sports. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned, how to meditate, how to be a reflective person, how to be more appreciative, how to be grateful. I was able to, focus on my partner. We got married. I was able to start my career as a teacher coach. And so I was just able, it forced me to focus on other aspects of my life. And so when I look back at the ACL injury, it's probably the best thing that could have happened to me, because I was able to grow in so many areas of my life. I was able to figure out that, like, my value isn't in my performances. My value is with me. And I don't think that would have happened had the injury not occurred.
Gotcha. It's interesting how life works itself out like that, isn't it?
For sure. Because going through it, man, I had no idea why. I was angry. I was real upset. I was just angry, just straight up angry. And I knew that I couldn't live like that forever. And it really just, it forced me into just some other things. So
yes,
it was good. It was good stuff.
A lot of personal growth.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
amazing. Yeah.
That's
awesome. All right, last question. I appreciate your time. So we talked about Alabama and how tough that game was. You said you guys did a lot of self-sabotaging, right? The game was 21-20, and you said that you like your chances in a rematch. You guys could have played much better. You could have played much better, which is kind of a predictable answer. But my last question for you is, I think football can be about matchups, right? Just like boxing. And Alabama plays Atlanta and it's 29-0. Then Alabama plays Texas and it's 21-20. That doesn't mean that Atlanta's necessarily better than Texas. but it
Mhm.
looks like, right? You look at the box scores, it looks
Yep.
like, right? So I think it's about matchups and how certain teams match up with others. And so, would you agree with that, or would you say it's more just Texas can only beat themselves and kind of the status quo answer?
Uh, I mean, matchups can always be a factor for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that we have the talent to match up against any team.
Right, right. When you play your best ball, yeah.
Yeah, and on it, it's frustrating when we all think about it, and I replay things in my head, and it's just very frustrating because we just did not play our best football. But like I said, I'd take that rematch any day, and I'd put money on us. But not taking anything away from Alabama. Like I said, they played all 4 quarters. They played with a lot of passion. They got some really great athletes on their team. So definitely not taking anything away from them. But we beat ourselves for sure.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Well, it was an honor to have you, Brittany. I apologize. You were my first ever Zoom guest to have a technical difficulty, which is completely my fault. I wish I could have saw that in the future and done something about it. But I'll have my editor piece it all together so it won't look bad on YouTube. And you'll be seeing. I'll tag you on Facebook. It'll probably be released this Friday or Saturday.
All right, cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. It was great to get on here and kick it and talk some football and life. I had a good time, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, no worries. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
All right, see ya.